Picture this. I'm standing in Karen Mitchell's pristine living room at 3 in the morning, dumping 17 bags of rotting garbage across her white carpet while she screams at the top of her lungs. The HOA president, Barbara Chun, is right beside me with her phone out, documenting every glorious second. How did a respected environmental engineer end up committing what looked like the world's most justified act of trash-related revenge? Well, let me take you back to where this dumpster fire of a story began. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm a 42-year-old environmental engineer who spent the last 15 years cleaning up contaminated sites across the country. In May of 2023, I finally bought my dream property, a beautiful 4-acre lot on the edge of Riverside, Meadows, a planned community just outside Portland, Oregon. The property had everything I'd ever wanted: mature oak trees, a small creek running through the back, and enough space to build the sustainable home I'd been designing in my head for years. The previous owner, an elderly man named Henry, had let me know during closing that there had been some minor disputes with the HOA over the years, but nothing serious. He assured me that most of the board members were reasonable people. What he didn't mention was that Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed environmental compliance officer, a position she'd created for herself directly across the street, and had been trying to force Henry to sell his property to her for the last decade. Karen was 56 years old, with bleached blonde hair that she kept in an aggressive bob, and she had the kind of face that looked like it had been perpetually sucking on a lemon. She wore designer athleisure wear every single day, despite never actually exercising, and drove a white Mercedes SUV that she treated like a tank. Within 24 hours of moving my trailer onto the property, she was already at my door. "You can't live in that," she said, pointing at my 32-foot travel trailer with the kind of disgust usually reserved for biohazard sites. "This is a community with standards. According to the county, I can live in a temporary dwelling for up to 18 months while constructing a primary residence," I replied calmly, holding up the permit I'd already obtained. "I checked before I moved in." Her face turned an impressive shade of purple. "We'll see about that." She wasn't bluffing. Within a week, I received my first violation notice from the claiming my trailer was an eyesore and demanding its immediate removal. I responded with copies of my county permits and a polite letter explaining that HOA rules cannot supersede county ordinances. That's when things started to escalate. Karen began documenting everything I did. She'd sit in her car across the street with binoculars, taking photos of me working on my land. She filed noise complaints when I ran my generator at 2 in the afternoon. She called code enforcement claiming I was running a business from my property because I accepted work calls. Every single complaint was investigated and dismissed, but she never stopped. The real problems began in August of 2023. I'd been clearing some brush and fallen branches from my property, creating neat piles of organic debris that I planned to chip for mulch. I was doing everything by the book. I even had the chipper scheduled to arrive the following Monday. But when I returned from a 3-day work trip to Seattle, I found something that made my blood boil. Someone had dumped trash all over my property. Not just a bag or two here, talking about at least 20 contractor bags of household garbage, spread across my cleared area like some kind of revolting carpet. The bags had split open, and the contents were scattered everywhere. Rotting food, dirty diapers, broken glass, old magazines, crusty paint cans, and things I couldn't even identify. The smell was absolutely nauseating. I immediately called the county sheriff's office. Deputy Tom Rodriguez came out to investigate, and he was genuinely shocked by what he saw. "This is illegal dumping on a pretty significant scale," he said, taking photos. "Any idea who might have done this?" "I have one guess," I said, looking directly across the street at Karen's house. She was standing in her window, watching us with what I swear was a smirk on her face. Tom followed my gaze and sighed. "Without evidence, there's not much we can do, but I'll file a report. Make sure you document everything, take photos, keep records of any communications. If this happens again, we might be able to establish a pattern." Cleaning up that mess took me an entire day. I had to rent a truck and pay $275 to dump it all at the county transfer station, but I took Tom's advice. I photographed everything from multiple angles, kept the receipts, and filed my own report. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, 30 bags of trash, dumped in the middle of the night. I'd installed security cameras after the first incident, but whoever did it knew exactly where my camera blind spots were. The footage showed a vehicle approaching around 3:30 in the morning, but the license plate was obscured with mud, and the person dumping wore dark clothing and a ski mask. But I recognized that white Mercedes SUV. I called Tom again, showed him the footage, and pointed out the vehicle. "That's Karen Mitchell's SUV," I said. "Look at the chrome running boards and that specific aftermarket roof rack. There's only one vehicle like that in this neighborhood." "The vehicle is similar," Tom agreed, "but the plate's obscured, and we can't see the driver's face. Her lawyer would tear this apart in 5 minutes. We need something more definitive." I filed another police report and sent copies to the HOA president, Barbara Chun. Barbara was everything. Karen wasn't professional, reasonable, and actually concerned about the community rather than her own power trips. She was in her early 50s, with glasses and an actual legal background, and she'd been trying to rein in Karen's excesses for years. Barbara called me the day after she received my report. "Marcus, I am so sorry this is happening," she said, genuine distress in her voice. "This is absolutely unacceptable. I want you to know that the board is taking this seriously. Is there anything you can actually do about it?" I asked, because Karen seems to think she's untouchable. "Let me dig into the HOA records," Barbara said. "Karen's been on the board for 8 years, and she's made a lot of enemies. If she's behind this, she's not just breaking the law, she's violating her fiduciary duty to the HOA. That could give us grounds to remove her from the board." Over the next month, the dumping continued. Every week or two, another load of trash would appear on my property. I was spending hundreds of dollars on cleanup and disposal fees. My insurance wouldn't cover it because I couldn't prove who was responsible. And Karen continued to smile and wave at me from across the street, looking like the cat that ate the canary. But I wasn't just sitting there taking it. I upgraded my security system with better cameras, including thermal imaging. I started documenting everything Karen did. Every time she drove by my property slowly, every time she stood at her window watching me, every HOA violation notice she filed. I created a spreadsheet with dates, times, and descriptions. I was building a case. The breakthrough came in October of 2023. My new thermal camera caught something the regular cameras had missed after the person in dark clothing dumped the trash. They got back into the SUV, and the thermal signature clearly showed 2 people in the vehicle. One was tall and bulky, likely a man. The other was shorter, and when they passed under my neighbor's Mosho-activated light for just a moment, I could see blonde hair. I sent the footage to Tom immediately. He watched it 3 times, then called me back. "This is good, Marcus. Really good. But I need to be honest, with U of N Whitties, the DA might not prosecute. It's still circumstantial, and Karen can afford expensive lawyers. But there might be another way to handle this." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Have you considered civil court? You've got documentation of financial damages, time lost, emotional distress, and the burden of proof is lower preponderance of evidence instead of beyond reasonable doubt. You might not put her in jail, but you could hit her where it really hurts, her wallet and her reputation." I spent the next few weeks consulting with a lawyer named David Park, who specialized in property disputes and harassment cases. He looked at all my evidence and smiled. "This is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen," he said. "You've done my job for me. We can absolutely sue her for harassment, trespass, and illegal dumping. And if we can prove it was her, we can ask for triple damages and attorney's fees." But before we filed the lawsuit, something happened that changed everything. It was a cold morning in early November, and I was heading out for an early work call. As I walked to my truck, I noticed something strange. There were trash bags in other people's yards too. Not just mine, but the Hendersons' property 2 doors down, the Patel's place across the street, and old Mrs. Richardson's yard on the corner. I walked over to Mrs. Richardson's house and knocked. She answered in her bathrobe, looking exhausted. "Marcus, did you see this mess? Someone dumped trash in my yard last night. I'm 83 years old. I can't clean this up by myself." "Don't worry, Mrs. Richardson," I said. "I'll help you. But first, I need to make some calls." I called Tom, then Barbara, then started knocking on doors. By 10 in the morning, we had 7 different property owners who'd been hit with illegal dumping overnight, and every single one of them had one thing in common. We'd all filed complaints about Karen Mitchell in the past year. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a pattern of retaliation, and now we had multiple witnesses and multiple properties. Tom brought in additional deputies to document everything, and Barbara called an emergency HOA board meeting for that evening. The meeting was packed. Every affected homeowner was there, along with about 30 other residents who'd heard about what was happening. Karen showed up with her lawyer, looking smug as ever. But that smugness evaporated when Barbara opened the meeting by projecting my thermal footage on the screen. "Before we begin," Barbara said calmly, "I want everyone to see something." The room went completely silent as the footage played the white Mercedes SUV. The 2 figures, the blonde hair, caught in the light. Then Barbara pulled up photos of trash bags from all 7 properties, showing they were the same brand, tied the same way, containing similar contents. Karen's lawyer immediately stood up. "This is circumstantial at best." "And sit down," Barbara interrupted. "I'm not done. Over the past month, I've been reviewing HOA financial records. Karen, as Environmental Compliance Officer, you have a discretionary fund of $5,000 per year for environmental management. Can you tell us what happened to that money?" Karen's face went white. "That's none of your business." "Actually, it's everyone's business," Barbara said, pulling up more documents. "Because I found receipts for the Riverside Waste Management Company's 17 payments of $150 each over the past 4 months. That's $2,550. And when I called Riverside Waste Management, they told me those payments were for special disposal services. They were picking up trash from your house and, apparently, disposing of it elsewhere. Would you like to explain where elsewhere was?" The room erupted. People were shouting, demanding answers. Karen's lawyer was frantically whispering in her ear, and I just sat there, watching karma prepare to strike. But that's when things took an even more unexpected turn. Tom Rodriguez stood up in the back of the room. "I need everyone to stay calm," he said. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to step outside with me. You're not under arrest, but I have some questions, and you might want to answer them with your attorney present." As Karen was led out of the room, her face purple with rage, Barbara turned to address the crowd. "I want to apologize to everyone affected by this situation," she said. "The HOA board failed to stop this earlier, and we take full responsibility. We will be holding a vote to immediately remove Karen Mitchell from her position and pursue full legal action for misappropriation of HOA funds and violation of her fiduciary duty." The vote was unanimous, 42-0. But I wasn't satisfied with just getting Karen removed from the board. She'd cost me months of stress, thousands of dollars, and countless hours of my time. She'd traumatized an 83-year-old woman. She'd turned my dream property into a nightmare. And she'd done it all with that smug smile on her face, thinking she was untouchable. So I made a decision. David Park filed our lawsuit the next day, asking for $50,000 in damages covering my disposal costs, property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages. But I also had another plan in mind, one that Tom Rodriguez had unknowingly given me the idea for during one of our conversations. "The thing about illegal dumping," Tom had said, "is that, legally, the garbage still belongs to the person who dumped it. If you can prove ownership, they're responsible for proper disposal. Some municipalities have even required dumpers to take their trash back home when they're caught." That conversation had sparked something in my mind. Karen had dumped her trash on my property. Well, maybe it was time to return her property to her. Of course, I couldn't just break into her house. That would be illegal. But I could wait for the perfect opportunity, document everything properly, and make sure I had witnesses official, witnesses too, prove I wasn't breaking any laws. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, I was reviewing the waste management receipts Barbara had given me when I noticed something interesting. One of them was dated for the next day, November 22nd, 2023, at 3 in the morning. Karen had apparently prepaid for one more special disposal service before everything hit the fan. I called Tom immediately. If Karen's waste service shows up tomorrow morning to dump trash on my property, and we catch them in the act, can we arrest them? Absolutely, Tom said. That's conspiracy to commit illegal dumping. But Marcus, I can't stake out your property every night hoping they show up. You won't have to, I said, a plan forming in my mind. I'll call you the moment they arrive. And Tom, when we catch them, those trash bags legally belong to Karen, right? She paid for the service. They're her property. There was a pause. Then Tom started laughing. Marcus, whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. And make sure you document everything. Oh, I will, I promised. Trust me, I will. What happened next would become legendary in Riverside Meadows the night the trash came home. Before we get to the epic conclusion of trash-related justice, Primeta need to know, have you ever dealt with a nightmare neighbor who thought they were above the law? What's the craziest thing they did? Drop your stories in the comments below, because after you hear what happened next, you're going to want to share your own revenge fantasies. And if you're enjoying this story of sweet, garbage-flavored karma, hit that subscribe button, because part 2 is going to blow your mind. Trust me, the trash hasn't even begun to hit the fan yet. The night of November 21st, 2023, started like any other. I was in my trailer, reviewing environmental impact reports for a client project in Tacoma, when my security system pinged at 2:47 in the morning. I pulled up the camera feed on my laptop and felt my heart start racing. A white panel van was slowly rolling down the street with its headlights off. It pulled up to the edge of my property, and 2 figures got out, both wearing dark clothing and ski masks. They opened the back doors of the van, and I could see it was loaded with black contractor bags. I grabbed my phone and called Tom Rodriguez. He answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. Marcus, what's going on? They're here, I said, watching the figures start pulling bags out of the van. The dumpers are on my property right now. White panel van, no plates visible, 2 suspects in dark clothing. I'm 10 minutes out, Tom said, and I could hear him moving quickly. Don't engage with them. Just keep recording and stay safe. Already on it, I said, switching my phone to record mode as I watched through my window. The 2 figures worked quickly, throwing bag after bag onto my property. They were efficient. Practice this definitely wasn't their first time, but they made one critical mistake. When they finished, one of them pulled out a phone to take a photo of their handiwork. The phone's screen lit up their face for just a moment, and I got a perfect shot through my telephoto lens. It wasn't Karen. It was a man I recognized from the neighborhood, Brad Michelle, Karen's husband, a guy I'd maybe exchanged 3 words with in 6 months, who always looked vaguely uncomfortable whenever Karen went on one of her tirades. The van pulled away just as I heard sirens in the distance. Tom must have called for backup. Within minutes, my property was lit up with red and blue lights, and there were 3 patrol cars surrounding the area. Tom came to my door with another deputy. Did you get footage? Better than footage, I said, pulling up the photos on my laptop. I got a clear face shot. It's Brad Mitchell, Karen's husband. Tom studied the photo, then looked at his partner. Deputy Martinez, I think we need to pay the Mitchells a visit. Right now. Wait, I said. Before you go over there, I need to ask you something. Those trash bags there, Karen's property. Right. She paid for them to be disposed of. But they disposed of them illegally on my land. So legally, they still belong to her, and she's responsible for proper disposal. Tom's eyes narrowed. That's technically correct. Where are you going with this, Marcus? I'm going to help you serve a warrant, I said, and I'm going to make sure Karen's property gets returned to her, legally and properly. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. You know what, Deputy Martinez? Go wake up Judge Wilson. Tell her we need an emergency search warrant for the Mitchell residence conspiracy to commit illegal dumping, misuse of HOA funds, and criminal harassment. I'll keep an eye on their house to make sure nobody leaves. And the trash bags? I asked. Well, Tom said, his smile widening, once we execute that warrant and confirm the trash belongs to the Mitchells, we're going to need to return their property to them. Might as well make sure it gets delivered to the right location. By 4:15 in the morning, we had our search warrant, and by 4:30, Tom Rodriguez, Deputy Martinez, Barbara Chun, who I'd called because she wanted to be there for, this and I were standing on Karen Mitchell's pristine front porch. Tom rang the doorbell, then knocked. Then rang again. Finally, an upstairs light came on, and I heard Karen's shrill voice through the door. Who the hell is it at this hour? Sheriff's Department. Mrs. Mitchell. We have a warrant. Open the door now, or we're coming in. The door flew open. Karen stood there in a silk bathrobe, her blonde hair in curlers, her face already turning red with rage. This is outrageous. You can't just... Tom held up the warrant. Search warrant for this premises, signed by Judge Wilson 30 minutes ago. We have probable cause to believe evidence of illegal dumping, conspiracy to commit environmental crimes, and misappropriation of HOA funds are present in this residence. Step aside, ma'am. I want my lawyer. Karen shrieked. You're welcome to call him, Tom said calmly, walking past her into the house. Deputy Martinez will stay with you while you make that call. Marcus, Barbara, you're with me. We're looking for financial records, receipts, correspondence with waste management companies, and anything linking the occupants of this residence to illegal dumping activities. Karen's house was exactly what you'd expect, everything white and chrome, with expensive furniture that looked uncomfortable and decorator touches that screamed, I have money and I want you to know it. Tom headed straight for the home office while I followed, and Barbara stayed close behind with her, phone out, documenting everything. The office was unlocked, and it was a treasure trove. Tom pulled on latex gloves and started going through filing cabinets, while I stayed back, not touching anything but watching carefully. He found folders labeled Waste Management, HOA Discretionary, and this was the kicker, Property Acquisition Strategy. Barbara, you're going to want to see this, Tom said, pulling out the last folder. Barbara stepped forward, her face growing more shocked as she flipped through the documents. She's been planning to force out every property owner who opposed her for the last 3 years, Barbara said quietly. There are notes here about Henry, the previous owner of Marcus's property, about the Hendersons, the Patels, Mrs. Richardson, all with strategies to encourage voluntary sales. She even has property values listed, and her target purchase price is all well below market value. Is that legal? I asked. The planning isn't illegal, Tom said, but the methods she used certainly are, and this is evidence of conspiracy and premeditation, which is going to make the charges much more serious. That's when we heard Brad's voice from upstairs. Kara, just tell them the truth. This has gone too far. I told you it would go too far. Shut up, Brad, Karen screamed. Don't say another word. Tom looked at Deputy Martinez, who'd come to the office doorway. Might want to separate those two before one of them says something they'll regret. But it was too late. Brad came downstairs, looking defeated and exhausted. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and the posture of a man who'd been beaten down by life, or more specifically, by Karen. I'll tell you everything, Brad said quietly. I'm done with this. I'm done with all of it. Brad, if you say one word... Karen started. You'll what? Brad turned to her, and for the first time since I'd known them, I saw genuine anger in his face. You'll make my life miserable. You've been doing that for 20 years. Karen, I told you this dumping scheme was insane. I told you it would blow up in our faces. But you never listen. You never have. Tom stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, I need to inform you of your rights. You have the right to remain silent. I don't want to remain silent, Brad interrupted. I want to tell you everything. Every dump, every payment, every lie. I want it all on record. And then I want a divorce lawyer. Karen's face went from red to white to purple in the span of about 5 seconds. You wouldn't dare. "Watch me," Brad said. Over the next hour, Brad Mitchell laid out the entire operation. Karen had started the dumping scheme 8 months ago, right after I'd bought Henry's property. She'd used HOA discretionary funds to pay Riverside Waste Management for special disposal services, which meant picking up trash from their house and dumping it wherever Karen specified. Initially, it was just my property, but when other neighbors filed complaints about her behavior or voted against her proposals, she expanded the target list. Brad had driven the van for some of the dumpings, but Karen had hired a guy named Rick, her handyman she'd used for years, to do most of them. Rick didn't know the trash was being dumped illegally. He thought it was legitimate disposal work. Brad had tried to stop her multiple times, tried to talk sense into her, but Karen had threatened him with financial ruin if he interfered. She controlled all their bank accounts, investment portfolios, and credit cards. She'd made it clear that if he crossed her, he'd end up with nothing in the divorce. "I'm not innocent," Brad said, his voice shaking. "I knew what was happening, and I didn't stop it. I participated in some of it. But I want to make this right. I'll testify against her. I'll pay a restitution to everyone affected. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want out of this marriage and away from her." Tom looked at me, then at Barbara, then back at Brad. "This is beyond what I expected to find tonight. We're looking at conspiracy, fraud, harassment, illegal dumping on multiple properties, misappropriation of funds, witness, intimidation. Karen Mitchell, I'm placing you under arrest." Karen tried to run. She actually tried to make a break for the back door in her bathrobe and curlers. Deputy Martinez caught her in about 3 steps, and the sound of handcuffs clicking shut was one of the most satisfying things I'd ever heard. "This is illegal," Karen shrieked as Martinez read her rights. "You're violating my rights!" "I'll have your badges. I'll sue all of you. I'll own this entire county when I'm done. My lawyer is going to... You'll appear before a judge in a few hours," Tom said calmly, cutting through her tirade. "Until then, you're going to county lockup. Deputy Martinez, book her on conspiracy to commit illegal dumping, fraud, criminal harassment, and misappropriation of HOA funds. We'll add more charges as the investigation continues." As they led Karen out to the patrol car, still screaming about lawsuits and rights and how everyone was going to pay, Tom turned to me. "Marcus, about those trash bags on your property, since we've now confirmed they belong to Mrs. Mitchell, you're legally entitled to return them to her. Would you like some help with that?" Primera smiled. "Actually, Tom, I've got a better idea. Since Karen's not going to be home for a while, and since Brad has just agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation, maybe we should return her property to where she lives. You know, for safekeeping, until she gets back." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You want to put 17 bags of trash in her living room? Well, it is her property," I said innocently. "And Brad, you wouldn't object to us storing Karen's belongings in your shared residence, would you? Just temporarily, until proper disposal can be arranged." Brad looked at the house's prison for 20 years and 10 at me. Then he started laughing. It was the kind of laugh that comes from someone who's been holding it in for way too long, the kind that's equal parts relief and hysteria. "Marcus, you can dump every single bag on her white carpet. Please, I'll help you carry them in myself." Barbara raised her hand like she was in school. "Can I film this? For the HOA records, of course, we'll need documentation of the proper return of misappropriated materials." "Absolutely," Tom said, not even trying to hide his grin. "In fact, I'll help document the proper return of Mrs. Mitchell's property to her residence. Everything by the book, fully legal, with multiple witnesses and official law enforcement presence." And that's how, at 5:30 in the morning on November 22nd, 2023, I found myself hauling trash bags into Karen Mitchell's pristine living room with the help of a sheriff's deputy, an HOA president, and Karen's soon-to-be-X-husband. We didn't just dump them in a pile. Oh no! We made sure to spread them out properly across her white carpet, over her white furniture, leaning against her white walls. Brad, who clearly knew where Karen kept her most prized possessions, showed us the best placement opportunities. The bag with the rotting seafood that had been sitting in August heat, right next to her designer Italian leather couch. The one with the old paint cans and chemical waste, positioned carefully by her antique china cabinet that she'd inherited from her grandmother. The bag that appeared to contain old cat litter, despite them not owning a cat. Brad confirmed it was from the house they'd sold 2 years ago. Dead center of the living room, right on the custom Turkish rug she'd paid $8,000 for. Barbara filmed everything, providing a running commentary like she was narrating a nature documentary. And here we observe the natural return of waste materials to their original owner. Note the careful placement of each bag, ensuring maximum coverage of the premium white carpet and designer furniture. The smell is quite remarkable. I'd estimate it at around 7 on the biohazard scale. Fascinating how the organic decomposition has intensified during outdoor storage. Brad was crying with laughter by the time we finished. 20 years, he kept saying between gasps. 20 years of her telling me the living room was off limits because it had to stay perfect for her ladies' club meetings. 20 years of me eating dinner in the kitchen while she entertained her friends in here. And now look at it. It's beautiful. Tom took official photos from every angle, documenting that we had legally returned Karen Mitchell's property to her residence with the full permission of the co-owner and in the presence of law enforcement. Everything was by the book, fully legal, properly documented, and absolutely, gloriously, perfectly justified. As we stood in the doorway surveying our work, 17 bags of garbage decorating Karen's pristine white living room like the world's worst interior design choice, turned to me. You know she's going to lose her mind when she gets out of jail. I'm counting on it, I said. Because every time she complains, every time she yells, every time she tries to sue us for this, we're going to remind her that this was her property, legally returned to her residence, documented by law enforcement, with the permission of the homeowner. There's not a single thing she can do about it. Barbara was still filming, slowly panning across the destruction. The HOA board is going to love this. We're meeting tomorrow, today, now to officially remove Karen from all positions and revoke her membership privileges. This footage is going to make that vote very, very easy. Brad offered to make us coffee, and we sat in his kitchen, the one room Karen apparently didn't care about enough to keep pristine, talking about next steps. Brad would file for divorce within the week. He'd cooperate fully with the prosecution. He'd testify about everything Karen had done. Not who's to May, but 2 other neighbors over the years. He had documentation of his own text messages, emails, even some recorded phone calls, where Karen had bragged about her schemes to her sister. Why didn't you come forward earlier? I asked. You clearly knew this was wrong. Brad looked down at his coffee cup. Fear, mostly. Shame. And say, Karen's parents left her a substantial inheritance, over $2 million, and she made sure. I knew that if I ever crossed her, I'd end up with nothing in the divorce. She controlled everything all. The bank accounts, the investment portfolios, even my credit cards. She gave me an allowance. Like I was a child, I felt completely trapped. But after tonight, after watching her get arrested, after hearing her scream at me one more time, I realized something important. I'd rather be broke and free than rich and miserable for one more day. You're not going to be broke, Barbara said firmly. The HOA is going to pursue Karen for every penny she misappropriated. And as the innocent spouse who's cooperating with the investigation, you'll be protected. Plus, with your level of cooperation, the prosecutor might cut you a deal. Community service instead of jail time, probation instead of a conviction. Tom nodded in agreement. I'll put in a good word. You made the right choice tonight, Brad. That counts for something in the justice system. As the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tom got a call from the county jail. Karen had demanded to speak with her lawyer immediately, and when he arrived, he'd informed her that everything we'd done was completely legal, and that she had much bigger problems to worry about than garbage in her living room. She'd been denied bail due to flight risk. Documented threats to leave the country if Brad ever divorced her had come back to haunt her. She would be held pending arraignment. Her lawyer asked if she could arrange for someone to clean the house. Tom said with a barely suppressed smirk. I told him that until the investigation is complete and all evidence has been properly catalogued. The residence is considered part of an active crime scene, and nothing can be disturbed. Should be at least a week before we release it. Maybe 2. Barbara raised her coffee cup in a toast to justice, served with a generous side of garbage. We all clinked our cups together, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Genuine peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though, that was admittedly satisfying, but because the nightmare was finally, truly over. Karen couldn't hurt me anymore. She couldn't hurt my neighbors. She couldn't terrorize Brad. And everyone in Riverside Meadows would know exactly what she'd done and exactly what she was. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was completely finished. Kara Mitchell didn't strike me as the type to go quietly into the night, and as the morning sun filled Brad's kitchen with warm light, I couldn't quite shake the feeling that the real battle was still to come. 3 days later, I got a call from David Park, my lawyer. His voice was tense in a way I hadn't heard before. "Marcus, we need to talk." Karen posted bail. "What?" I said, shocked. Tom told me she was denied bail for flight risk. She appealed to a different Judge Thompson. Her lawyer argued that she wasn't a flight risk because her husband has frozen all their accounts, and she literally has nowhere to go. Thompson granted bail at $250,000. Her parents put up their house as collateral. So she's out. She's just out? She's out. And, Marcus, there's more. Her lawyer filed a countersuit this morning. She's suing you for breaking and entering, destruction of property, emotional distress, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. She's asking for $500,000 in damages. I felt my stomach drop. But we had permission from Brad. We had law enforcement present. Everything we did was completely legal. "I know that," David said, "and we'll win. But Karen's strategy isn't to win, it's to make this so expensive and time-consuming that you'll give up. She's going to drag this out as long as possible, cost you as much money as she can in legal fees, and try to break you financially and emotionally. It's a war of attrition. So what do? David was quiet for a long moment. We fight back harder than she's ever been fought back against. And Marcus, I think it's time we showed Karen Mitchell exactly what happens when you mess with an environmental engineer who knows how to document everything and has access to public records. Okay, I need your honest opinion on this. Was the trash in the living room move justified, or did Marcus go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story is about to get even crazier. Karen's out on bail. She's filed a massive countersuit, and Marcus is about to discover something about her property that's going to change everything. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up for part 3, where the gloves come completely off and the real war begins. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. David Park wasn't making empty promises. Within 48 hours of Karen's countersuit, he'd assembled a strike team himself: forensic accountant Jennifer Wu and environmental law specialist Robert Chang. We met at David's office on Saturday morning. Karen Mitchell made a critical mistake, David said, spreading documents across the table. She sued you personally, which means we get to conduct discovery on her finances, her communications, her entire life. And Marcus, given your background, I think you'll find what Jennifer discovered very interesting. Jennifer pulled up a presentation. I've been analyzing the Mitchell property records going back 15 years. Karen's house sits on a 2-acre lot, and according to county records, there used to be a dry cleaning business on that property in the 1970s and 80s. The business was Mitchell Family Cleaners, owned by Karen's parents. Okay, I said. So, Jennifer continued, dry cleaning operations from that era used It's a known carcinogen and serious environmental contaminant. When I cross-referenced the property with the EPA's Contaminated Sites database, guess what I found? She clicked to the next slide, and my jaw dropped. The Mitchell property was listed as a potential contaminated site requiring further investigation in a 1998 EPA report. But the investigation never completed because Karen's father died, and the property passed to Karen through a trust. She's living on a potentially contaminated site, pre-meticide slowly, and never disclosed it. Worse, Robert Chang jumped in. When Karen sold the dry cleaning business property to developers in 2015, she signed disclosure documents swearing there were no environmental issues. But she kept the parcel with her house on it, which was the actual location of the dry cleaning operation. The storage tanks, the waste disposal area, right where her house sits. I pulled the documents closer, my environmental engineer brain kicking into gear. If there are still underground storage tanks and they leaked, we're talking serious soil and groundwater contamination. PERC can migrate through soil for decades. It could affect the entire neighborhood's groundwater. David smiled. Now you see where we're going. Karen sued you for $500,000, but if her property is contaminated and she knew about it, she's violated about a dozen federal and state environmental laws. Cleanup costs could run into millions, and every neighbor affected could sue her. Can we prove she knew? Primera, asked. Jennifer pulled up another document. This is a letter from the EPA to Karen's father informing him of the investigation and requesting access for soil testing. Karen was copied on this letter as executor of her father's estate. She knew. She's known for over 25 years. The pieces fell into place. That's why she wanted to buy Henry's property so badly, and why she targeted anyone who might look too closely at property values or environmental issues. She was protecting her secret. Exactly, David said, and now we're going to use that secret to bury her countersuit. Over the next week, we worked like we were preparing for war. I conducted a preliminary environmental assessment using public records, historical aerial photographs, and my professional knowledge. What I found was damning. You could literally see the dry cleaning facility in aerial photos from complete with apparent above-ground storage tanks. By 1995, the building was gone, but there was obvious soil disturbance right where Karen's house was later built. I filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, providing all documentation and requesting immediate investigation. I also contacted the EPA's regional office, pointing out the 1998 investigation had never been completed. Both agencies responded within days. The DEQ showed up at Karen's property with a full investigation team. They drilled soil borings, tested groundwater, and brought in ground-penetrating radar. What they found was worse than expected. 2 underground storage tanks, never properly removed, slowly leaking perk into the soil. The contamination had spread to at least 3 neighboring properties, including Richardson's yard, where Karen had dumped trash. The cleanup estimate came back at $3.2 million. Karen's homeowner's insurance denied the claim because she'd failed to disclose the known contamination. Her parents' estate had a small environmental insurance policy, but it lapsed in 2005. She was personally liable for every penny. When the news broke, Riverside Meadows erupted. 17 families filed a class-action lawsuit against Karen for property devaluation and health concerns. The HOA sued her for fraudulent concealment and breach of fiduciary duty. The county threatened criminal charges for environmental crimes, and the EPA placed a lien on her property for the full cleanup cost. Karen's lawyer called David 3 days after the DEC report went public. My client wishes to drop her countersuit against Mr. Webb. In exchange, we're asking that Mr. Webb not pursue additional civil action. David looked at me. I thought about everything Karen had put me through, the months of harassment, the dumping, the stress, the money spent. Then I thought about Mrs. Richardson, the Hendersons, the Patels, and all the other neighbors who'd suffered. And I thought about Brad, finally free. Tell Karen she has 24 hours to sign a settlement agreement, I said. She drops her countersuit, pays me $50,000 for my actual damages and attorney's fees, signs a statement admitting to the illegal dumping, and agrees to never contact me or any Riverside Meadows resident again. If she doesn't sign, I file my own lawsuit for fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And I'll make sure every news outlet in Oregon knows about the contamination she's been hiding. Karen signed the agreement in 18 hours. But the story doesn't end there. The environmental cleanup took 2 years and ultimately cost Karen everything. Her house, was demolished. The contaminated soil was excavated and hauled to a hazardous waste facility, and the property was eventually sold to the county for $1 to cover part of the cleanup costs. Karen's inheritance was gone. Her reputation was destroyed, and she ended up moving to Arizona to live with her elderly parents. Brad got his divorce, and in the settlement, he received half of what little remained. He bought a modest condo on the other side of Portland and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in decades. He even started dating a teacher at the local elementary school. As for me, I finally built my dream home on my 4-acre property. It's a fully sustainable, off-grid house with solar panels, rainwater collection, and a geothermal heating system. I made sure to include a state-of-the-art security system, but I've never needed it. The new neighbors are wonderful, and Barbara remains the HOA president, running things with actual competence. Tom Rodriguez was promoted to sergeant, and he still jokes about the night we returned Karen's trash to her living room. "Best warrant execution I ever did," he says. The trash bags, by the way, stayed in Karen's living room for exactly 9 days before the crime scene was released. According to Brad, the smell had permanently permeated the carpet, walls, and furniture. Everything had to be thrown away. Looking back, I realized that Karen's biggest mistake wasn't dumping trash on my property. It was underestimating what happens when you mess with someone who knows how to document everything, who understands environmental law, and who refuses to be bullied. She thought she could intimidate me into leaving. Instead, she exposed her own secrets and lost everything. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about standing your ground, following the rules, and letting someone's own actions destroy them. Karen Mitchell built her house, literally and figuratively, in a foundation of toxic secrets. And when those secrets finally came to light, everything collapsed. I still live in Riverside, Meadows. I still drive past the empty lot where Karen's house used to stand. And every time I do, I'm reminded that the best revenge isn't getting evenettes living well, building something better, and making sure that bullies can never win. The neighborhood is peaceful now. The contamination is cleaned up. And Karen Mitchell is just a cautionary tale we tell at HOA meetings. The woman who thought she was untouchable and learned, too late, that nobody is above the consequences of their actions. So, was it worth it? All the stress, the legal battles, the money spent on lawyers and investigations? Absolutely. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about Mrs. Richardson, who deserved to feel safe in her home. It was about the Hendersons and the Patels, and every other neighbor Karen had bullied. It was about Brad, who finally found the courage to leave. And it was about making sure that the next person who moves to Riverside Meadows never has to deal with someone like Karen Mitchell. Justice served cold with a side of garbage, and a large helping of environmental consequences. 5 years have passed since the night I returned Karen Mitchell's trash to her living room. 5 years since the environmental scandal that destroyed her life and changed Riverside Meadows forever. Justice doesn't always look the way you expect it to. My sustainable home is everything I dreamed it would be. Solar panels generate more electricity than I need. Rainwater collection keeps my gardens lush, and geothermal heating keeps me comfortable. But the best part isn't the technology, it's the peace. No more harassment. No more trash dumping. No more looking over my shoulder. Barbara Chun is still HOA president, and under her leadership, Riverside Meadows has transformed. She implemented transparent financial reporting, created a community garden where Karen's contaminated lot used to be, and established a neighborhood watch that actually watches out for people. Property values have increased 30% since Kara left. Brad Mitchell sends me a Christmas card every year. He's remarried now that elementary school teacher turned out to be the love of his life. They have a small house with a big backyard where Brad grows vegetables and raises chickens. He told me escaping Karen was like being released from prison. Mrs. Richardson passed away 2 years ago at 80. She lived long enough to see Karen's house demolished and the contaminated soil removed. At her funeral, her daughter told me her mother's last words were about how the neighborhood finally felt safe again. Tom Rodriguez made captain last year. He still tells the trash warrant story at training sessions as an example of creative law enforcement within legal boundaries. Young deputies listen with wide eyes as he describes 17 bags of garbage spread across a white living room. As for Karen Mitchell, life in Arizona hasn't been kind. Her parents' house put up as collateral for bail was foreclosed on. Karen works at a discount store now, living in a small apartment and driving a 15-year-old sedan. Her social media accounts are now private or deleted. She became the cautionary tale she always feared. But here's the thing about revenge and justice, they're not the same thing. Revenge would have been me actively destroying Karen's life. Justice was making sure she faced consequences of her own actions. I didn't contaminate her property. I didn't force her to lie on disclosure documents. I didn't make her spend HOA funds on illegal dumping. She did all that herself. I just made sure the truth came to light. The environmental cleanup revealed contamination affecting the neighborhood's groundwater for decades. 3 families whose children developed rare cancers sued Karen's estate, and her parents' remaining assets were divided among them. The EPA recovered most cleanup costs by placing liens on other properties Karen had inherited. David Park retired last year and moved to Hawaii. Before leaving, he told me the Karen Mitchell case was the most satisfying of his career because justice and karma aligned perfectly. He still calls occasionally to remind me that sometimes the system works when you have patience, documentation, and the law on your side. I've become somewhat of a local legend in Riverside, Meadows. New residents knock on my door to ask if the stories are true. Did I really return 17 bags of trash to someone's living room? Was there really a woman who tried to force people out through illegal dumping? Did it end with an environmental disaster? Yes, and yes. But I always tell them the most important part. It wasn't about winning. It was about standing up to a bully and refusing to be intimidated. It was about documenting everything and following the rules, even when it would have been easier to fight dirty. It was about protecting, not just myself, but everyone else Karen was terrorizing. The empty lot where Karen's house stood is now a beautiful community garden. Barbara organized volunteers to plant native flowers, install benches, and create walking paths. There's a small plaque reading, Riverside Meadows Community Garden, Est en 2024, in memory of what was and hope for what will be. Those of us who lived through the Karen Mitchell era understand its deeper meaning. I've been asked many times if I feel guilty about what happened to Karen. The answer is simple. No. She made her choices. She chose to harass neighbors. She chose to use HOA funds illegally. She chose to hide environmental contamination, endangering families. She chose to sue me after getting caught. Every consequence she faced was the direct result of her own decisions. What I do feel is relief. Relief that the nightmare is over. Relief that the neighborhood is safe. Relief that bullies don't always win. And relief that I stood my ground instead of running away like Karen wanted. My 4-acre property is exactly what I hoped it would be. The sustainable home I built is featured in environmental magazines. The oak trees are thriving. The small creek is clean and full of wildlife. Every morning when I wake up, I look out at my land and feel grateful I didn't let Karen Mitchell drive me away. Sometimes people ask what I learned from the experience. The answer: document everything. Know your rights, stand your ground, and trust that truth will eventually come out. But most importantly, understand that living well truly is the best revenge. Karen Mitchell lost everything trying to make me leave, and I'm still here, living my dream, in the home I built on the property she tried so hard to take from me. That's real justice. That's real victory. And that's the end of the story of how I returned 17 bags of trash to someone's living room and changed a neighborhood forever.